carrying on with a look at the budget in the UK and how that might affect people abroad, expats. And as expected, the rise in capital gains tax very much baked in with the budget. We'll get to that shortly. We're still talking about how the pensions were affected with Christina Brady.
We're talking about inheritance tax now. So
we are going to go there. Okay,
yeah,
I thought we'd finish.
That's to do with pensions. And
okay, I see what you say.
Right. Before the budget, if you had a pension and it was unused before you were 75, you could leave it to your beneficiaries tax-free. So when you died, it didn't form part of your estate. As suspected, they've changed that rule. So from the 6th of April 2027, any unspent pensions will form part of your estate when you die. As we know, she did not raise the inheritance tax allowances, and she's not going to. So it means if you are a single person, you get 325. If you're married, you get 650. Before your estate has to pay inheritance tax, unless you use the 1 million allowance on your property, and then obviously that's the way you can do it. But for normal people, 650. So if you have a large pension and you died before 75 you could leave it to your beneficiaries and it didn't form part of your estate. So now that forms part of your estate. So that means if you go over the threshold, everything is taxed at 40%.
Wow.
So what people did to avoid inheritance tax in the UK is they used a vehicle called a QNUPS, which was basically a pension. So it was a qualified non-UK pension scheme, and they put their assets within this to avoid UK inheritance tax. Now that is subject to UK inheritance tax. So all that estate planning has gone to waste. But don't act hastily, don't start to panic. There are ways around it. And I have got one that's come through, and it just I'll read this through because it just sort of explains to people how it's going to work.
Okay.
So if you had a 50-year-old man, okay, and had £1 million pension pot, and he died, this is after 2027, okay, and he'd used up his personal allowance and other things, so he had a house, so he didn't have to, the tax on that million would be, it'd only leave 600,000 left because he'd be taxed at 40%. Okay, so that's if he's got it in a QNUPS. So if he's got it in a QNUPS, okay, and he's used up his nil band tax rate, anything above that will now be taxed at 40%. So for high net worth, not even high net worth, for individuals that had used this to reduce or stop inheritance tax by putting, because you could put properties in the QNUPS, various other things, it now has completely mitigated that. However, you can take out what's called an indexed universal life policy alongside a QNUPS, and what that does is it gives you a payout on death. If you put $1 million in, the payout on death would be about $3 million. Okay, so you take off your inheritance tax that you've lost through your QNUPS, okay, and it still leaves you with about $2 million left to inherit instead of losing 600,000. So there are ways. So if you've got a standard QNUPS, okay, you'd only get 600,000. If you took out an enhanced QNUPS, that was what they're calling this, you could get 1.9 million. So there are ways around it. And
this is going forward. People who had already done this are still okay?
Yeah, no, because they've now got a pension. Their QNUPS is a pension. All pensions are now subject from 2027. So unless you're planning to die before the 6th of April 2027, that QNUPS is now subject to UK inheritance tax. Okay. And what people have to remember is we may live in Spain, but if you're domiciled in the UK, you are still subject to UK inheritance tax as well as Spanish succession tax. It doesn't matter where you're resident. Residency is completely different to domicile. Domicile is usually your country of birth or country of origin, which is assumed where your father was born, country of dependency, or you can choose where it is. So, but if you've got any links to the UK, you are usually considered domicile, and it's very, very difficult to leave domicility. I just put some notes down on it because it's a very difficult thing. People say, but I'm not resident in the UK, I don't have to pay inheritance tax in the UK. Yes, your estate does on your worldwide assets. So non-UK residents, tax residents, which I am, Okay, we are liable for UK inheritance tax on a worldwide estate. I don't understand how the UK is going to find out what you've got elsewhere in the world unless you tell them. I've tried to look that up on the website. How does HMRC find out? But I couldn't find any answer to that. And in the UK, there is no time limit on inheritance tax. Like in Spain, you've got the 5-year limit. So in Spain...
They haven't got you, but after that,
yeah,
you're
in
okay.
Spain, the Spanish don't tell anyone someone's died for 5 years. After 5 years, they can't come back to you for the inheritance tax. In the UK, that only applies to gifts, so you have to live 7 years. But in the UK, they can go back. There's no time limit. And they usually go back 20 years minimum.
So who is it they're trying to get here? It's not your average Joe Schmo, is it?
No.
Why are they going down that route?
What they're trying to... Well, it's always been this way with the domicile. You have to pay, but with the inheritance tax, they're going after everybody on inheritance tax because if you think most people in the UK now, their property is worth over 300,000. Most of them are worth over 500,000. So if you choose to take your property tax free, it gives you no allowance. So therefore, if you've got a pension, say of 250,000 in the pot, that's going to be taxed at 40%. You can't do anything about it, and the people that avoid it by putting the QNUPS they're getting at. So really,
the Chancellor's going to make something like what, 2.5 billion to £4 billion on this? Is that what?
That's what they're saying. But I don't know if it's going to come to fruition. But to lose your domicility, you have to prove that you can't have been resident in the UK for 15 of the last 20 years, or had a permanent house in the UK in the last 3 years. Even stating in your will that you want to be buried in the UK can mean that you're still domiciled there. And also, this is one I didn't understand. In Spain, when you do a will, if you want to make sure that you can nominate who your beneficiaries are, you have to state you want UK law of succession, because otherwise you get forced heirship. If you state UK law of succession, HMRC, if they're picky, can say that means you're domiciled in the UK. So, and you've got the case with Richard Burton. He'd moved every asset outside of the UK and died in, I think it was in Switzerland, but said he wanted to be, his ashes ought to be buried in Wales. Therefore, HMRC said he was still UK domicile and went after the tax. So you have to be very careful between domicility and residency. So if you are resident in Spain but still domiciled in the UK, you should be paying UK inheritance tax. And we need them to state that if you are outside of the UK, does your pension, like if you've got a QROPS, does it still fall, if you're not a UK resident, as part of your estate? So, but I think it will. I think that's going to be...
Well, they're not going to say no, are they?
No, not if it gives them more money.